This workshop called The Perfect Storm is focusing on the neurodevelopmental disorders. So ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, things like that, but it's all nervous system related. And so even more of a genetic or a connective tissue, soft tissue disorder, like the Ehlers-Danlos, tongue twister there, it's all very much to do with how the brain is communicating with the body. And in that individual or an individual that has a, let's say, predisposition to more laxity in their ligaments, their muscle control is even more important. They're more likely to dislocate a joint, and so they're going to rely on the muscle tone to secure the joint of whether it's your elbow or your spine or anywhere. It's harder for them to break a bone, good and bad, but easier to dislocate. So, but then there's also the question of, we'll talk a lot about birth trauma. What happens to that baby's spinal cord as they're being born, coming through the birth canal. So those little ones with the Ehlers-Danlos, they're going to have even more flexibility, which can help and hurt as far as what happens to the spinal cord when they're being born and how does that impact on the rest of their life. So that's what we're going to get into here, and we're going to go through this perfect storm slide decks here. So as parents, you have three options, and the options are: one, traditional medical. We're all aware of that. We live in a Western medical society. Every ad has that with the options of surgery, different types of more invasive procedures generally. And that's an option. We need that. We need trauma care, but it's not the only option. The second option would be functional, as in like OT, PT, integrative, holistic, natural practitioners. There's naturopaths, all of that. There's that whole realm of functional or more natural medicine, I guess you could say. And then we're going to put ourselves in the third realm. That's the tonal or neurological chiropractic. So when we say chiropractic, most people have a pretty good idea of it's something to do with cracking the spine. When we say tonal chiropractic, that's where we're kind of out there on a limb a little bit, or the neurological part. May sound kind of foreign to you, but everybody's familiar with tone. If I would say like the tone of my voice, you know what I mean? If you say muscle tone, you know that, oh, you want a muscle to be tight, but not too tight, not too loose. Tonal chiropractic is looking at the tone and tension in the spinal cord, which then dictates the tone and tension of every other nerve and organ system in the body, because the brain controls the body. So we're going to be a spinal cord or neurological system first chiropractor. We're going to look at the spinal cord and assess the tension patterns on that, more so than the structure of where a bone is out of place or where a muscle is tight, because those are secondary to the spinal cord. And that's a little bit different of how we work, but also it lends itself really well to anybody with too much laxity or maybe arthritis or a fusion in their spine that doesn't allow the traditional chiropractic adjustment. And then pediatrics as well. A lot of parents aren't so game or aren't so thrilled about their little one having their neck cracked or popped in a traditional sense, and we don't have to do that. So,
if I may ask,
yeah, any questions? Welcome.
Yeah. What's with this foot reflexology or
the foot reflex?
Because,
yep.
Because that's what a lot of other people promote or say. Okay, that's where it all starts. It's not on the spine; it's on the foot. You can find the head, you can find the brain, you can find the organs all in the foot. And
oh, are you talking? Okay.
All these things, then you're going to feel better.
Okay, so you're talking about like the acupressure, acupuncture, the reflexes, like the pressure points in the foot that can be done.
Right.
Yeah. So what that's talking about is a lot of our nerves in our body, they surface somewhere on our body, and a lot of them will surface in the hand. A lot of them will surface on the foot. So there's like a point on the foot that will connect to like different parts of your intestines, or like this part of it can be like the large intestine. Or some people have pressure points for like headaches and different things like that. So what that's doing is it's saying like, okay, that nerve, let's just say for the large intestine, surfaces here. If I press right here, I can stimulate that nerve and sometimes kind of shake it up enough to get my body to reconnect. It's a little bit of an outward in approach, or you're trying to work with the peripheral nerves to influence the central nervous system. With chiropractic, we just go right to the central nervous system and find the problem right at the source. So that's essentially what the difference would be there. Yep. So this is a quick little video that we have. It's called the Moonwalking Bear, and we'll just have this play here and watch it quick.
How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
The whole point there is it's very easy to miss something you're not looking for. I mean, the video, the title of the slide is The Moonwalking Bear, and yet they say count passes, and immediately we're just tunnel vision counting passes, and there's a guy dressed as a bear moonwalking. Most people don't notice that at all. And it's not like we snuck it in there and called it The Moonwalking Bear. So when you're not looking for something, it's really easy to miss it. The point that we're getting at here is the situation, the parameters or the environment that is set for this perfect storm, and oftentimes the resulting conditions of the neurodevelopmental disorders, it's not that hard to identify once you're aware of them, once you're looking for them. So what is the perfect storm? The sequence of stressors and sickness. So first thing is significant mental emotional stress during prenatal period, and that would be in mom. So 50% of the cases where we have the ADD, autism, anxiety, about 50% of those cases, the neurodevelopmental disorders, mom had a stressful prenatal period. So it starts there. Secondly, medical intervention during labor and delivery. So that can be epidural, C-section, forceps, vacuum extraction, etc. 80% of the cases where we've got kids with autism and learning challenges, 80% of those cases, there was a traumatic birth also. But once again, if we don't look for spinal cord trauma, we're not going to find it. It's very easy to miss. Stressed, colicky, constipated baby. Constipation is 4 times more common in children with autism than those without. So just like some of these things that we kind of just assume is like, oh, normal or bummer, that's just random chance. It's like, no, there is a environment that is set for this. Just like the conditions have to be right in order for there to be a tornado, the conditions are often such that these sorts of conditions will result, or the neurodevelopmental disorders. Sensory, colicky, sick, challenging toddler. Use of antibiotics in infants and children under the age of 3 increases the rates of allergies and asthma 2 to 4 times. Continue on. Sensory spectrum, hyperactive, emotionally stuck child. So the rates of autism are more than tripled since 2000. Part of that is because we're diagnosing and watching for it. So that's part of it. But part of it's our environment is definitely changing. So 1 in 44 children, boys 4 times more likely. And then ADHD diagnosis in kids has soared 67% just in the last 20 years. 3.5 million kids are now on ADHD medication. It's kids on medication. And these ADHD medications, they're not that different than some of the street drugs. Methamphetamine, a lot of them are amphetamine classifications. They are stimulants. It's, we're setting kids up for potential addiction in the future. And exhausted, angry, anxious, depressed teenager, we move right on as they keep growing. Rates of anxiety have soared, and it's even higher than that with the last 2 years now with COVID lockdowns. And then we get to a burnt out, stressed out, anxious, and ADHD adult. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the United States, affecting 40 million adults in the US, 18.1% of the population. Almost 20% of our population is affected by an anxiety disorder, which is crazy and extremely unfortunate. So what we're really talking about is stress stuck on. Your body has 2 settings. You have like a gas pedal response called your sympathetic response, and you have a brake pedal response, which is the part of your brain that calms you down from a stress response. So it's okay to get stressed, but you got to slow down. It's okay to run fast or drive fast, but you got to slow down too, otherwise you get in trouble. So gas pedal, brake pedal, we talk about that a lot. And the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. So it's definitely an input part, and then also processing and output. So your information that your brain can give out to the heart and lungs is only as good as the perception it got from the environment too. So it's it's a two-way street. Altered perception, right? When your little one is not getting the right information, they're for sure not going to respond in the appropriate way. And we see that as adults too. Brains are built from the bottom up, back forward over time. And when the neuromotor system is altered, everything else is altered. So we look at the developmental process here, and we'll see that first, motor. So first thing kids do, move. And if they start and they don't have proper movement, all the other development is kind of set off. So if they have subluxation in their spine, let's say from birth, and they don't turn their head right away, maybe they don't crawl right away, and then even it traces right into learning. So we see that as milestone delays, and the CDC recently just pushed back all the milestones, which is crazy. So kids aren't making the normal milestones as far as crawling, sitting, walking as often, and so they just changed the goalpost. Not saying why is this different, they changed the goalpost instead of trying to figure out what the reason is. So second, gut, immune, speech, social, behavioral, emotional. So it builds on itself right through those 7 different parts. The hierarchy of neurological health and healing has 3 steps in the sequence. Autonomic nervous system first. So that was that gas pedal, brake pedal. That's for the layperson, I just say think of it as the automatic nervous system. Sounds like automatic. So when you hear autonomic, think automatic. Runs all the organs, all the stuff that's just automatically, you're not thinking about it. Motor was to move you. That's like your muscle system. And then the third would be the gut immune system. It develops third. So the Harvard Developing Child discussion, this is an interesting discussion that's been going on for some time now, but it's kind of this like chicken or the egg, genes or genetics versus epigenetics conversation. So what we're looking at here is the interaction of genes and experiences shape the developing brain. So it's kind of like you talk about our first impression, and it kind of sets you off to whether or not you like that fruit or vegetable, or whether or not you like hot weather. If you got burned by a sun as a young kid, that probably changes the way you feel about being out in the sun the rest of your life. So although genes provide the blueprint for the formation of the brain circuits, these circuits are reinforced by repeated use. Cognitive, emotional, and social capacities are inextricably intertwined through life course. It's our experiment. So this is just setting the stage to say, hey, the way that our kids start to develop, it impacts them all through life. And so the better start we can give them, the better off they'll be. Toxic stress weakens the architecture of the developing brain, which can lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, physical, and mental health. We identify 3 different stresses in chiropractic. They're physical stress, chemical stress, which would be that toxic one, and then emotional stress. And all 3 of those play together to individually or as a combination overwhelm our brain throughout our life, which then creates that blown fuse. We call it nerve interference or subluxation, where the brain is no longer communicating with the body because it got overwhelmed. So here we are looking at the human brain development and how the different pathways develop and how they should, and what consistent stress does. It's just some fancy testing showing that consistent stress actually changes the way the brain is developing and wiring. Now, the good thing is it can heal and it can relearn pathways, but we want it to develop appropriately from day one. So the perfect storm algorithm. When we're looking at like what's the likelihood of a child or a family getting into the perfect storm, and all of this applies to us as adults too. It applies to us all through life. We're just starting from day one with the kids. Look at how much stress, the 3 T's. So you can say 3 T's, the thoughts, traumas, and toxins, or like I just said, physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, however you want to organize them. When did the stress occur? So how long? How much care for how long to help restore the neurological balance. So that's what we're looking at, in that this is not a complete science, just like plug it in and know, but there is a lot of science to determining how much care, how frequent. It's not just a cookie cutter approach by any means. So the neurospinal system, this is one of the coolest charts we have. It'll be included in your folder tonight. It's called the neural fuse box. So you can look at all these different functions of the body, and it's by no means an exhaustive list, but it will go and show you what parts of the spine control what parts of the body. And so this Dr. Tony Ebo is quoted by saying, the spine serves as far more than a bunch of ligaments and bones. It's a living, breathing neurological communication superhighway that is vitally important in brain to body and back again, communication, coordination, and control of every other tissue, cell, and system of the biological and physiological system. It's literally the master control system of your body that you never want to be miscommunicating. So subluxation, like we said, stress stuck on. That's when the brain has disconnected or is not communicating. And to kind of simply put, it results in getting stuck in a stress response or stuck in a lower capacity to heal. So this is where we can dive really deep into what's called the 10 Ds of subluxation. The fancy words that all start with D that are how subluxation negatively affects us, and we can go as deep or as we want, but we can also tailor this to the individual story. So dyskinesia, that's talking about, once again, movement. So kinesia, like kinesiology, means moving. Dys means dysfunction. So abnormal ligament or alignment and movement. Disafferentation would be abnormal sensory input. So that's that sensory part. If you can't get the accurate information from your environment, you have zero chance of responding appropriately. Dysautonomia would be imbalance of the autonomic nervous system. Remember, that's the automatic nervous system running all the organs and the glands, the stuff that you hope to never have to think about, but you do think about it when your heart's racing. You don't think about your heart rate right now, hopefully, if you're not anxious or right? You don't think about your digestion right now, but when it's not working, then you start to think about it. Dyskinesis is the abnormal energy expenditure and output. Disconnection, interfered brain-body connection and development. So all of these things happen, and it starts with movement. It starts with if that spinal cord is traumatized in the little baby or adult even, and it's not fully reset or reconnected, you live with a disconnected brain-body connection from that point forward. And that's the concern. It's a two-way street. It's really anything can go wrong when there's brain-body connection that is altered. But when you are sick and you're stuck in a storm and you have the opportunity to reconnect that, anything can go right. Any condition can be resolved. So here's that moonwalking bear. We're going to bring that full circle. So what we're looking at here is just a short clip of a C-section, and they try to keep it PG here, but this, most people have never seen what that looks like. And we're going to show just a short clip of it. And just pay attention to how the baby is held. So there's a forceps, a suction on its head, pulling it out. And then to deliver baby out of mom, the doctor simply grabs the head and lifts the baby out by the head, back and forth. You would never do that to a baby that was born. You'd never hold a baby by its head like that. But that's how a C-section is, quote unquote, appropriately done. Now that little baby hopefully was checked for trauma to the spinal cord and not just been like, oh, they're fine, they're not colicky. But even in that case, when babies are colicky, when that's not attributed back to, hey, was there damage to the spinal cord there? Do they need to be adjusted? Can we help that brain reconnect to the body? Because C-sections are necessary sometimes, but we can't just leave it right there. We can't just wash the hands and say, oh, we're done. We need to look deeper to how can we help that baby fully recover. C-section rates back in the 70s all the way up to currently 2021, we're looking at 33 times, and sometimes it's even done as more of a convenience thing, scheduling your C-section. It's just, I want to have my baby here so this can happen, and the consequences are not fully appreciated. Here at 99 in 100 infants, at least one pattern of subluxation was found, and this isn't just in C-section. This is just birth. In the most natural birth we're talking about this week can have significant spinal cord trauma. And so that's not just to say, oh, there was a natural birth, there wasn't forceps, there wasn't suction, there wasn't C-section, we're fine. Always a good idea to check. And here's some more. This will be included in your packet as well. So as we go through here, dysautonomia and other brain functions. The amygdala, you've heard of the amygdala hijack. When that deep part of the brain is so stressed, you kind of lose all reason and lose all ability to talk. It happens more so with little ones, but even adults can get to the point where they are literally out of their mind. They are just in knee-jerk reaction mode. That happens with little ones as well, and adults. The hippocampus, factual learning, prefrontal cortex plays a central role in cognitive functions. So just the different parts of the brain that we not try to geek out on this and get confusing, but that each have a vital role. And we need to appreciate that in order to understand how detrimental it can be when the spinal cord or the brain, any part of it, is altered or traumatized. And here is a great quote. You can't be in growth and protection at the same time. That's Dr. Bruce Lipton. He would be considered kind of the father of epigenetics. And have you heard of the term of epigenetics before? So genetics, that's like the genes you got from your parents. The study of epigenetics is looking at how those genes are expressed based on your lifestyle choices and environment. And what he has found and he has proven with stem cells. So real quick, the story goes, he is teaching stem cell biology and he's also doing research at the same time. And he is finding in the lab, it's kind of the opposite story of what is in the current textbooks. He's finding that the environment that a stem cell is growing in is much more important or determining what that stem cell becomes than what it was to begin with. So basically a stem cell is a cell that they took the nucleus out, they took the genetics out, So it's not supposed to know what to become. It should just sit there and do nothing. But when they put that stem cell, that's why they can inject it into a knee and they become new knee cells and it grows there. But they took a stem cell and they put it in like muscle blood, and then all of a sudden the stem cell becomes muscle. So basically the environment is what told the cell what to become. It wasn't so much, and that's kind of what they currently understood. But then they took cells like that had not been stripped of their genetics and they put it in an environment of like, they took like a bone cell and put it in the blood of muscle, and it actually morphs and becomes muscle cell. So the takeaway, the environment and our environmental choices is like the 90% factor of whether or not we have cancer, heart disease, all that stuff. It's not just the genes you got from your parents, which is a very empowering message, because I would rather have control over my likelihood of a heart attack rather than just say, yep, too bad, I'm high risk and nothing I can do about it. So vagus nerve, that is the most important nerve pathway in the body as far as slowing down that stress response. It's like the brake pedal to the stress response. And we gotta have that working correctly if we're gonna allow ourselves or our little one to come out of that stress response. And so that's looking at some sensory processing disorder research, the brain gut before the gut brain. There's a lot of talk, a lot of moms out there have like come across this idea of the brain gut connection. And so we look at the gut and changing our diet and getting gluten out and how that impacts the brain. That's true. But there's much more of a brain gut connection. Brain runs the gut. So yes, what you put in your gut influences your brain. But if we can improve the brain to gut connection, we're not as sensitive to gluten and sugar and dairy and all this stuff. Not saying that those are good things to limit or take out of your diet, but it's a one more reason to say, hey, there is a brain body connection that we cannot overlook. Developmental diasthesis. This is some more the differences of just like showing the research behind disconnecting and the patterns of. So here it's talking about cerebellar dysfunction. It disrupts the way that the brain will develop, and that is something that we don't want for anybody. And traditionally, I love this at the bottom part, the cerebellum has been studied in relation to motor movements. That's the back part of your brain. So traditionally we thought that's the back part that controls balance and coordination. They're finding out more and more now it does that, but it also has emotion processing, emotion, memory processing, a lot more of that component to the brain too. So all the time we're finding that the brain is intertwined and interconnected more than we have ever realized. And I tell people about, it's probably the nervous system is probably the system of the body that we understand the most about. It's also the system that we have the most to learn about. So if you can wrap your head around that, I mean, we understand the cardiovascular system to the point where you can transplant a heart. We understand that really well, and I don't know if there's a whole lot more to understand on that system alone, but the nervous system, constantly learning more about. So diaschesis, the Greek term meaning shock throughout, is a sudden loss or change of function in a portion of the brain connected to a distant but damaged brain area. The site of the originally damaged area and the diaschesis are connected to each other by neurons. So that's where, like, here, this one shows it a little bit better. Developmental diasthesis. So when there is in this case, a local injury, where that X is, when there is a traumatic injury to one part of the brain, it has a ripple effect to the rest of the brain. So just tying in, the brain is so connected. We can't just say, okay, there's head trauma right here. So, okay, what does that part of the brain do? Okay, that's the only part that we'll expect to have dysfunction in. It is all so interconnected. Good thing and a bad thing, because any part of brain trauma is not nothing to mess with. It affects the whole body, but God made us that way so that we can wire and rewire. It's called neuroplasticity. So even if there is brain trauma in one area, the brain can actually regrow new pathways around and beautifully compensate to the point where sometimes you never even know that there was trauma in one area. So yeah, distortion, disruption, disconnection, damage. So subluxation is disconnection. We got a couple of quick videos that we can show us, like before and after. This little guy, this is before care. Very unresponsive. Not happy to be in the car seat. Here are his scans over here showing like before. This is a thermal scan. Wherever we have color here, that's showing where there's abnormal temperature regulation and abnormal organ function regulation. There's a video. This was the scans that we do in the office. It's a thermal scan. Yeah, that was just where he was to start with, and then we're going to show him a little bit later here. So this was at a progress evaluation a little bit after that. Totally different kid. This is just a matter of weeks later. This isn't like, okay, 2 years later, look at him. Interactive, watching the camera.
What is it?
It's just a matter of getting the brain to connect to the body. So we're seeing just a lot better cognitive function there. Motor milestones here. We got another example of this little girl walking here, or trying to. Not so sure. And child's not going to walk. They're going to get angry if they don't feel connected, if they're not balanced. You can't blame them for not wanting to try to walk and fall. Fast forward, motoring around. And so the scans had just improved much, walking on the farm. So, and that's showing like the perfect storm there, where we had tons of inflammation there. Let's see the date. Yeah, this is like 3 months. This isn't a lot of time here, but going through and showing before and after of what changes there. Here's another, just a couple of testimonies that we have. Like, you can see these on our website, similar ones. The scans just give an example for what we can even tell. So we always want to know the story of the family and the child, but just from the scans alone, we can tell a lot about what they're probably experiencing. So the scans on the top here is a muscle scan showing where the muscles are too tight. So like the drunken bull here, not a lot of activity, just very tight up top, but kind of exhausted and just uncoordinated. White would be normal. So white is normal, and where you see color, it's abnormal. Raging bull, the whole thing is just lit up. That little child is just high strung and wired, wasting a ton of energy, probably having a very hard time focusing, sitting still, immune system problems. And then we see kind of a combination of the two there. But these patterns give us an idea of where that distortion is, and we watch these patterns improve because we can't rely just on symptoms. We want to actually rely on functional testing to see and be able to show parents. So these are the scans that we do. I can show a picture of it at the end here, but there's 3. One of them is a thermal scan, compares the temperature of one side of the spinal cord to the other. Should be very balanced, but if there's a heat hot spot, or one side is hotter than the other, that is correlated with autonomic nervous system dysfunction. So that will show us that the organ system is not functioning well. This one is taking a reading of the microvolts of electricity coming off of those the muscles that are controlling the spinal cord. So when there's too much electricity, it correlates to too tight of a muscle. So basically, when we see the red, that means tight muscles, wasted energy, inappropriate movement. And then there's a third scan that we look at for the overall stress balance. That's like the gas pedal versus the brake pedal. And we can do these scans to plot and to track progress. So yeah, it's kind of before and after, looking at some more scans. This is what the scanning technology looks like. But in our office, we have a 3-step process. First, like I said, we listen and dive deep into the child's case history, but also hear the story of the family, because the caregivers, whether it be grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, brother and sister, they're all involved in this and have obviously been very much so impacted by whatever the, I'll just say, neurodevelopmental challenge has been. Second is the neurosensory stress scans. So those are the scans, picture of that. And then third, we do a report of findings. We make a specific care plan and recommend that to have a care plan laid out so it's clear, it's understandable. We have objective measures, we have subjective measures. We're just trying to watch for that progress, watch for that change in as many ways that are reasonably possible to be able to show that and prove that ultimately, and not just rely on the symptoms and the changes that the parents or the child can report, which oftentimes that's right there right away. We want to also show it onto the on the computer, on the scans. So frequently asked question 1 and 2, how long does it take? When am I going to start noticing? We're in a society that is so built on the idea that when I feel better, I'm healthier. So it's kind of like, I'm not healthier until I feel better. So the question is a fair question. How long does it take to start noticing results? That's largely dependent on how long, like we said, that algorithm earlier on, how much stress, how long ago did it occur? So basically, how long has the individual been living with the stress? And then we can plot that out and have a better idea for how long might it take to see that kind of functional improvement. But everybody's different. Once again, some, the younger the person is, kids, they heal faster. Cut on their arm will heal faster in a 4-year-old than it will on my arm. And that's just, their bodies are younger and they are just in many ways moving faster. So Second, there is how you ever get my sensory or spectrum kid to get still. That's just a matter of what's causing it. If the brain is overfiring, yes, if the brain is overfiring, and that is just, yeah, if that, it's hard to expect someone whose brain is telling them to move and then try to have a child sit still and pay attention to a school lesson or whatever it may be. So when the root cause is addressed, then it makes it so much easier for them to benefit from the help they're getting from the help at the aides at school, the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, whatever. Everything else works better when the brain is working better. So last step here is action steps. For anybody wondering, okay, what do we do with this? How do we take action? We often talk about in our office that knowledge is powerful. And there's the saying that, you know, knowledge is powerful, and I agree with that. But without action, it's just knowledge. So that's where we want to give some action steps. The first thing is, here, keep seeking hope, answers, and help, just like you came tonight. So each one of you are interested in some level. You know, what can I do to continue progressing? And this is not the be all end all. This is not the only source of hope, help, and answers. Keep seeking that out. Second thing is just schedule your child or for yourself. Let's call it a discovery exam. And that's where you get the consult, scans, report of findings. We can schedule that tonight, but we call it a discovery exam for the reason that our one intent is to discover if we are confident that we can accept that case and help. And if we can, we say yes, here are the recommendations. If we can't, we say, this is what I would do. But it doesn't help us at all to accept the case that we're not confident we can help. It's a waste of time for both of us and reputation for us, so we don't do that. We refer out. So just be rest assured that we only accept cases that we're confident we can help with.
What would be a case you wouldn't take?
Well, it'd be a case that is like, well, first off, you have to match with the goals. So if somebody has the goal of saying, hey, I want to be pain-free in 3 days, can you do that? Can you guarantee that? It's like, well, no. So if the goals are unreasonable to what we can offer, then that would be, hey, we're going to refer out. But a lot of cases, if we find that there is nerve interference and we can remove that, which that's what we specialize in, then that person can be helped. But if their expectations are such that we need X amount of change in this time, like I'm not God, I can't force physiology in that way. So that would not be a good one to not to go into partner up with. So, but many cases we can accept, and we do that. So that was everything we had for tonight. Do you have any questions after that?